In the autumn of 2018, I began working on a story for the Wall Street Journal about how bottled water makers were trying to quell concerns many Americans were having about single-use plastic. To figure out how integral plastic bottles had been to the mainstream commercialization of water, a drink freely and safely available out of a tap in many parts of the world, I started digging into the past. Along the way, I noticed that many of the documents and articles I was finding from the 1990s onwards sounded very familiar. Several of the companies currently promising to make their bottles from recycled plastic had made the same promises before, sometimes several times, over the past few decades. Starting in 1990, I counted at least 8 instances when Coca-Cola had set a sustainability target for its plastic bottles, usually around recycling, and then failed to meet this. These failures didn't deter Coke from continuing to publish flashy new press releases, offering no explanation about its missed targets while touting new ones. Given that polyethylene terephthalate, or PET, the plastic used to make drinks bottles, is the easiest to recycle of all plastics, why, I wondered, had companies repeatedly set such targets only to miss them? Why was the PET bottle recycling rate in the US below 30%, more than half a century after Coke and Pepsi had first started putting their soft drinks in plastic bottles? That bottled water story, eventually published on the journal's front page in December 2018, was the start of my interest in the deep dependence that consumer goods companies have on single-use plastic. The vast majority of plastics today are derived from fossil fuels. Plastic production, if it continues on its current growth trajectory, is estimated to account for 20% of the world's oil consumption by 2050. Many plastics are made using a bewildering array of additives that can leach into food and drinks. Scientists are increasingly concerned that such chemicals, even in very low doses, are impacting our fertility, growth, and other functions. Tiny plastic particles have been found in everything from fetuses to the human brain, with potentially huge knock-on effects for our health, as well as for biodiversity and the ocean's ability to act as a carbon sink. Globally, the equivalent of 1 garbage truck of plastic waste ends up in the ocean every minute. Plastic comprises between 70% and 80% of the litter that ends up in land and marine environments. Most plastics are uneconomical to recycle. More than 3 decades after US municipalities began including plastics in their curbside recycling programs, the country's recycling rate for discarded plastic packaging stands at 13.6%. Globally, just 9% of all plastic waste ever created has been recycled. Many of the consumer goods companies and supermarket chains I spoke to seemed desperate to distance themselves from the problems associated with single-use plastic. But the more I looked, the more I saw a glaring say-do gap. In London, where I live, fast food chain Leon was putting drinks in cups it touted as compostable, without telling customers there was no composting infrastructure available, and it was sending these to incinerators. Unilever and Kimberly-Clark were telling people to put biodegradable face and baby wipes in their bins, claiming these would ultimately break down in landfills. Guaranteeing anything will break down in a landfill is a fool's errand. Researchers have found 20-year-old corn cobs with all of their kernels intact in landfills, as I'll tell you about in this book. If the wipes did break down, they'd release methane, a potent greenhouse gas. Sainsbury's announced in 2019 that it had removed plastic packaging from its single cauliflowers, yet whenever I visited the supermarket chain stores, I saw cauliflowers in plastic. Iceland, the frozen foods chain, said it would eliminate plastic packaging for its own label products by 2023. Not only does it continue to use large amounts of plastic, but it hands over its online orders in enormous disposable plastic bags instead of the reusable crates other supermarkets use. Every few months, an email landed in my inbox detailing how plastic waste accepted for recycling was found to have been landfilled, dumped, or burned.